British Columbia is world-renowned for its natural beauty, diverse communities, and thriving culture. It's also known for being in the grips of a housing affordability crisis decades in the making, which has been compounded by a poison drug crisis and by the COVID-19 pandemic. The province has an ambitious plan to address the crisis through the largest investment in housing affordability in BC's history. Tasked with building tens of thousands of homes in hundreds of communities is BC Housing, the province's agency responsible for developing, managing, and administering a wide range of subsidized housing and homelessness services across the province. BC Housing doesn't do this alone. To address the challenge, they're working with hundreds of partners. In this podcast, you'll get to hear from those delivering innovative and exciting affordable housing solutions. I'm Sarah from BC Housing, and this is Let's Talk Housing. Today, we'll be taking a closer look at one of the most vital portions of the housing system, shelters. Shelters are not homes, but they are a key resource. For people who rely on shelters, these spaces can be a lifeline. Not only do shelters provide a refuge from the weather, they are also safe places where people can access food, showers, washrooms, and be connected to services including healthcare, counseling, income assistance, and cultural supports. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we are recording this podcast on the ancestral homelands of hundreds of Indigenous peoples and nations across British Columbia, each with their own unique traditions and history. Today, we are on the ancestral and unceded homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, who have been the caretakers of these lands for thousands of years. We offer our respect to their peoples, past and present. Also, in full transparency, this episode was recorded in October 2021 and reflects the issues at that time. Joining us on Let's Talk Housing today is Mike Musgrove, Executive Director of Surrey Urban Mission, also known as SUMS, which has been working since 2001 to transform the lives of those experiencing homelessness in Surrey through shelter, meal programs, and community connection services that assist with health, supports, housing opportunities, and income assistance. Also joining us is Gwyneth Jones, a social worker and member of the Health Sciences Association of BC. Gwyneth works for Vancouver Coastal Health, helping connect people in the healthcare system with housing and shelter. Now, before we start the conversation with Michael and Gwyneth, I want to share a clip from Anthony, who recently stayed in a SUMS shelter.
I was living in a house, and they sold the house underneath me. They sold it, and then they told me they sold it. So I couldn't find a place. I tried looking. Nothing. I ended up homeless because my mother died in 2019, June 1st. So I ended up in another shelter for 3 months, and then I moved to a house, and then I came to here.
Gwyneth, let's start with you. As part of your work with people who are facing homelessness, are the experiences that we heard from Anthony similar to what you hear from the people that you work with every day? And how do you support them through that?
They are. I would say also with the folks that I'm working with on the downtown east side, often folks they've been in homelessness for quite a long time. So I do come across folks where their story is sort of a newer experience. Certainly we know the pandemic has put a lot of pressure on people in a variety of ways, which has increased housing instability for folks. I find on the downtown east side, often though I'm working with folks that have been homeless for many, many years and have multiple barriers. And I don't know everything about that gentleman's story, so I don't want to say that he doesn't also have barriers, but certainly if you add in, mental illness and addictions and, chronic health conditions, like the options for you just narrow and people get stuck in shelters. Although I will say I've worked with folks that prefer shelters. They really feel like that's a space that works for them and they feel really supported by the staff. And that wasn't something that I understood until I started doing work in this kind of space.
Gwyneth, you mentioned something I'd like to dig into there. What about a shelter could make that the right choice for someone experiencing homelessness?
People that I've spoken to really like having the choice and they can find a space that works for them and the flexibility. So, a low barrier setting is really important for some folks. a place with a bit of higher barrier settings, some more rules. They feel safer there. Maybe if they're in recovery, they feel better supported by that. Other folks who at other stages, maybe in their addiction journey, really need a harm reduction oriented space. So certainly that flexibility there is important. And often people really feel incredibly supported by staff and shelters. And that's something that I didn't realize until I started doing this work, that, staff are providing so much amazing support to clients, and clients really feel that. So much so that, from a healthcare perspective, we would almost consider it, an alternate level of care where, if we're trying to get someone assessed for more home support, sometimes VCH staff will come in and say, oh, actually, they're doing great. They don't need any home support. It's like, oh, no, that's because these guys are doing all this amazing work and offering medication reminders. And, the food is often really important for people. They talk about what great food they get. And so that was something that was really interesting to me. I had always assumed, and certainly this is true for people, that shelters are a one stop on their journey and they want to move on to something more secure and it's their own and they can close the door. But some of our guys, they like the communal environment. They like the people, the energy, and the extra support they get, which I just hadn't occurred to me until I started doing this work.
Now, Mike, through SUMS, you operate shelters in Surrey, which is BC's second largest municipality, a very diverse community. What are some of the unique challenges that SUMS faces in providing services to people experiencing homelessness in Surrey?
We really have to try to not take a unilateral approach to care. And I think what Gwyneth was talking about is really key, that every one of our guests has a unique level of giftedness and needs that we want to learn and serve. So we have someone who comes in and may need home health support. Until that home health support's there, we're working on that, and then hopefully getting that as quickly as possible. So the struggles really are being able to serve the needs of the folks that are coming in, to be able to care for them in a way that is effective, without having a profound negative effect on our staff. We have a lot of older folks coming in with incontinence issues and coupled with addiction issues and other, and it becomes quite difficult for our staff to work with that. And I think that as soon as we get, collaborate with we're Fraser Health, so as soon as we collaborate with them and get services in, we're able to lift that need. But I think all in all, if you're looking at like the issues that we're facing, a stagnant housing environment where people are unable to move forward. So you're trying to create a sense of community and belonging in a situation that could become quite just a place for problems to just continue. And so trying to move people forward emotionally when they're not really moving forward physically, moving people forward with some of the decisions that they're making, without moving into independence. Those are some of the struggles, but also really like the best part of the job when you're able to kind of see people learn and grow and become part of feel good about themselves and become part of a community. We really do. I know that shelters are not housing, but we really do want to strive to make every one of our shelters feel welcoming and like a home. Because the options aren't really there right now, we do want to see more and more people find safe places to go. But like Gwyneth said too, there are some people that just thrive in the shelter environment that haven't done real well in housing. Someone who is say a hoarder, someone who collects a lot of stuff. I think of one person in particular. He had been housed a few times, and each time he would fill his house with the stuff he was collecting, and then he'd be back out on the streets because his house was too full of stuff. And in a shelter environment, we're able to work with that and every day monitor and work with him on some of his needs. So yeah. But that's just one person. Like when I talked originally, I said a unilateral response is probably, this top-down approach and a unilateral response to the needs, as opposed to really getting to know the individuals and building our action based on the individual, as opposed to what we see from a top-down as a unilateral. This is going to work for you.
Right. Mike, I'd like to build on that. Certainly, you have seen the importance of not taking a unilateral approach during your work on the front lines of the pandemic over the last few months. Can you talk about how SUMS has supported people during COVID?
Yeah, pretty exciting and devastating, and all of those things when COVID hit in March 2020, and we had a quick announcement that we might be having to open an ERC, so Emergency Response Center, and we start doing our research, trying to figure out what is going on, how people respond to these pandemics. And it was, and then you have shelters that are too crowded. We're having to decrease the size of our shelters. And there was just so much going on. And coupled with that was opening an emergency response center that really was at first potentially for people that were COVID positive. Then it was about, decreasing capacity of shelters so that there was more space for folks for safe distancing. And then, but it's been an absolutely, I think, amazing experience with the collaboration portion of it, with working with Fraser Health. They're embedded into the ERC. I think at times prior to COVID, we were working at odds at times, getting people coming from the hospital into the shelter, and you're like, what's going on? And now we're just really, I think that the level of understanding that we've gained working with Fraser Health, with the what they've gained in understanding the shelter system and the importance of it, and the unique needs that we have, has really been amazing. And on that whole idea of collaboration, we've had just an amazing time of building connections with other societies, other areas in the region that, we're in meetings from Vancouver to Boston Bar, and this stuff is all very new to us but exciting. And you're seeing the world, COVID kind of made the world of shelter and caring for these folks kind of tighten up a little bit. And I think that's been a real benefit, but it's been nonstop. I don't know if you guys all recall, but you probably do, but the amount of changes that were coming. But imagine those changes, like as you're going through them in your life, you're being told no masks, no gloves, yes masks, yes gloves. But that's being spread through. We're growing. We're suddenly opening another 96 beds. We had just opened a shelter, so we've really grown from one shelter to now, a lot. And we're now having these changing procedures constantly. It was a real challenge, and trying not to create that kind of insecure environment with our guests, right, was probably the biggest challenge of it. Was we're going through such a transition, but you don't want to pass that on to the folks that are already kind of frightened by what's going on, and dealing with a lot of insecurities to begin with.
Oh, absolutely wild times. It's bringing me back for sure. Gwyneth, from your perspective, working in the health system, how did that collaboration work in Vancouver during the COVID response?
It was fascinating. It was fascinating to watch these some huge agencies and some really nimble, smaller community agencies come together. When you could still go to meetings in person just right before super hard lockdown, I stood in a huge auditorium, like everyone was being very responsible at social distancing. And there were representatives from, Vancouver Coastal Health was there, City of Vancouver, Park Board, the association of the community center we were standing in. There were at least 2 not-for-profits present. And there was at least, I can't think of them now, but this huge number of folks representing their agencies. And we were all there because we were going to try and open the CRC, this emergency response center. And it was just remarkable to see it happen. And there was a certain level of, like chaos and confusion and fear. But also it was like, this is happening. We got to get it done. Let's do it, And so it really certainly strengthened a lot of relationships, I think, as you were saying. Built some more trust that between agencies. And then certainly like helping the not-for-profits, like fill the emergency response centers. It was one of my roles during the COVID, the team that I worked on. So being able to respond to them when folks were like, this guy came out of hospital, you said these things were dealt with, but they haven't been, like, can you help me problem solve this? 100%. I could be the person who then called back to the hospital. And because I was a VCH member and part of the care team, I would get answers that shelter staff wouldn't get. So they felt more supported. The hospital felt more supported. The clients felt more supported. Like it was quite remarkable that way. Of course, there wasn't the same problems always apply. There's never enough beds. We got, I think, something like 700 or 800 referrals for these beds. And we were able to place, I think, maybe 130, 150 folks over the course of the time that they were open. So those things are still a reality for sure, but it was exciting to be a part of that, and just strengthen those relationships and build some trust and communication, that was very cool to be a part of, and to see that clients felt well supported. Again, good food, good staff. That was the other thing. These agencies, not-for-profits, are trying to hire at the same time, right? You're trying to onboard people. People don't know where the telephone is. Like it's a new building. Like it was just chaos, but everybody did a phenomenal job. And the clients felt really supported. And people were really happy with the experience that I heard from.
I think that you really hit on an amazing aspect of all this. And that's what you can do that we couldn't do before. And the ability to communicate and get movement and help and medications. And this took so much time for us before. And now, like even getting home health, it's now very quick, and that was all pressure on our staff. And now we work and then we hear like, okay, this person needs to take these medications then, and we work with folks and we get this medication out. That was really exciting. The other thing that I wanted to cue in on too, that you mentioned was training. We were, at that time it was when we don't know what's going on. And so
sometimes it was changing, like you get news in the morning and then by the afternoon, the protocol was different. You're like, what?
Completely. And we had, we were saying we're building the plane as it's flying, right? Was our constant motto during the ERC. And we also had this kind of, this idea that we were at war, kind of, that this was very serious, and you weren't gonna ask questions right now. You were just gonna do what you're told. And it sounds really harsh, but when you're training 40 people on protocols that are changing constantly, you can't you don't even know the answers to the question. You just know that the protocols are changing. I think the first day we didn't know whether we were supposed to wear masks or not, and gloves, whether gloves were supposed to be worn. Could you get them even if they were supposed to be worn? Supply was so difficult. We were like, okay, well, you know what? We used to dispose masks all the time, and now it's like, keep your masks. It was, so exciting and traumatizing and chaotic and organized. It's just like such a cacophony of things going on. But what a wonderful I just wanted to really cue in on the idea that training was amazing, and then just as far as bringing it together was very difficult. And throughout all this, BC Housing has been so incredibly supportive. Just not a lot of like working through how do we get funding for this. It was like, we hear you, we believe you, let's get that done. And that part has been just phenomenal. Just the kind of the red tape was just removed. And it was like, there's no time to be asking questions. We need to act. And it was amazing to see. And so many partners, like really like the collaboration part of this, but It's been fantastic.
There's so much that we can learn from this, right? So as we're recording this podcast right now, we're in the fourth wave. And in Surrey, in the downtown east side, we know that our communities are being impacted by the fourth wave and the Delta variant in particular. But hopefully sometime soon, we're going to be through this pandemic and into an endemic. Looking ahead to that, Gwyneth, what do you think that we can learn from the collaboration between healthcare and shelter providers around how we can provide shelter and housing to folks in the future state? What lessons do we take from this?
Gosh, I hope that people take, that sort of spirit of like that we're all on the same team, and I think people like academically sort of thought that before. I did, I'm like, these are all our clients, really. They're moving between different services. But it's hard when you're trying to, navigate systems that are putting in roadblocks, not to get irked with people and then other people in that system pick up on that. So I think the improved relationships, the improved, kind of communication, better understanding, like certainly the role I was doing at the time was that liaison role in a smaller group of folks. So to be able to expand on that and build new relationships was really fantastic. So yeah, I hope that people can help with those communication pieces so that if people are having needs in shelter, that they can be met more quickly by a healthcare provider. I think what we've learned in terms of longer term housing, for folks that do want to transition out of shelter, and it could just because I work in healthcare, so this is what I see, but that it's really important to have healthcare pieces built into these new settings often. At least with the folks that I work with, very rarely is it that they're able to kind of waltz out the door and just be successful in an independent living situation. I'm sure there are folks out there for whom that's true, but not so much for the folks I work with. So to have those extra supports, staffed buildings, healthcare going in, that's really helpful. So I look forward to seeing that sort of as we move forward and take that learning. And I do feel that certainly funding partners, in this case, it's really mostly the province, but the feds probably too, and the city where they can, they've recognized that. And so people are really, that conversation is way easier these days about things that we need, which is exciting because it hasn't been that way for a while anyways.
Yeah. So Mike, from your perspective as a shelter provider, what are the steps that we need to take going forward to provide the best types of supports and services to people in the shelter system?
Yeah, I think a key is to not lose the collaboration. It's been absolutely phenomenal. I really do believe that with the health being embedded or closely linked, we really can move from the needs faster and start looking at giftedness and building on gifts, harnessing the gifts that our guests have and carry that we so often ignore because we're so busy addressing needs. And I think that once you can start doing that, then you build on that to start building that belief, the care for self. And, that's where we can really begin to see great work. That's when we can see people really successful as they move on to housing. And that's really key for us. And I think that along with this is the ability to move from a less of a top-down approach to caring for people and working from a base of understanding, as opposed to I think the traditional, this is the way we're going to do it, top-down approach, where the people that are impacted the most have the least say. I think now is the time where if we can continue this, which I'm really excited about, we can start building from the voice of the people that are impacted from the decisions the most.
Absolutely. And that's a really great way to end today, is just a reminder of the importance of building from the voices of people in the system. Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you, Gwyneth, for joining us on Let's Talk Housing today. Let's talk again soon. To learn how to apply for subsidized housing in British Columbia, visit our website, bchousing.org. You can also call us at 1-800-257-7756. That's 1-800-257-7756. 7756.